everyone, and welcome to this month's Denise Amberly Foundation Wednesday webinar. We're so excited to have Fred Miller here for his presentation on resources for supporting children on the autism spectrum. Following the webinar, we will send out a certificate and the link for a replay. We'll also be uploading our webinar to YouTube for easier access. The Denise Amberly Foundation was founded by Denise's husband, Nathan Lee, in June of 2008, 6 months after her tragic death. The foundation's mission is to help 911 centers across the country to avoid a similar occurrence to someone else. We work to support public safety through uniform training, standardized protocols, quality assurance, and technological advances to 911. The foundation offers on-site and online courses, third-party quality assurance services, as well as other opportunities throughout the year, including our monthly Wednesday webinar. For more information, email info@deniseamberly.org. Today's presenter, Fred, he is the Senior Program Manager for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He graduated from American University in Washington, D.C., and after 40 years with the Prince William County, Virginia Police Department, he joined the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to oversee its training programs and activities. Among his many public safety assignments, Fred has been a crime prevention specialist, school resource officer, and investigated crimes against children. Fred's experience includes serving as the director of the Prince William County Office of Public Safety Communications and the Criminal Justice Academy. His command responsibilities included missing and exploited children, internet crimes against children, special victims, and youth services. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Fred for today's presentation.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. And I just want to first let you know that the pollen count is very high here in the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. And so if my voice sounds a little scratchy, I apologize, but the pollen is getting to me a little bit, and I have some water here to help me get me through, but I just want to give you a heads up in case you have to lean in to hear what I'm saying. Today we're going to talk about some things specifically, then give you an overview of the mission of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, share some of our data, talk about understanding children on the autism spectrum, provide you with some resources, and then we'll, if there's time remaining and we'll address any questions that we can, or I will respond to questions that arise thereafter. So please feel free to contact me at any time after this webinar with any questions you may have or any way we may assist you. And my contact information will be at the end of this presentation. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, was founded in 1984 by John and Reve Walsh after their 6-year-old son, Adam, was abducted from a shopping mall in Florida. He was later found murdered about 100 miles from his home. And his tragic death and that of other missing children during the same time, such as Eton Pates in New York City, the Atlanta child murder victims, and others, inspired a movement to create a coordinated national response to the issues of missing and exploited children. Back in those days, for those of you too young to know, you could not enter a missing child into NCIC. It was easier to report and track and find a stolen boat than it was to find a stolen child. But today, NCMEC is a non-profit, non-government organization that's based in Alexandria, Virginia. And we are congressionally authorized to perform 15 specific duties related to missing and exploited children. But our programs go far beyond that, thanks to our public-private partnership model, which is supported by a wide range of private, nonprofit, and other government agency partners. Over the past 3 decades, we've grown from a handful of volunteers meeting in the Walsh's garage to an organization that was put into law in 1984, signed by then President Ronald Reagan. And now we have a staff of over 300 employees, hundreds of volunteers, and offices in 4 states. This is our mission. It's the 3 parts of the stool, which is one, to find missing children. The second mission is to reduce child sexual exploitation. And the third part is to prevent future victimization. And it is our motto, it is our belief that every child deserves a safe childhood, and we never give up hope that we will be able to accomplish our mission. I will just briefly touch on our mission to say that this is the team that I work on, which is the outreach, training, and prevention team. We actually serve all three of these parts of our mission. In that we do the public outreach, we provide prevention resources, we provide training on finding missing children and child sexual exploitation. We have operational divisions within NCMEC that focus on these three areas, primarily on the operations of finding missing children and through our cyber tip line and child victim identification program to address child sexual exploitation. We also have a child sex trafficking team, a sex offender tracking team. We have a recovery services team for survivors of child sex trafficking, and a host of other resources and services available. Later on, I will mention this, but while I'm thinking about it now, I want to also say that by going to our website, missingkids.org, you can find a host of publications that are available for free download, which may be of assistance to you. So today, April is National Autism Awareness Month, and so we are taking this opportunity to talk specifically about autism spectrum disorder. And this is the definition that is provided by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And you will see that it is a developmental disability. And it is called a spectrum because the autism spectrum, because of the fact that the children are at varying levels of being able to function with their learning, thinking, and problem-solving abilities. So fairly obviously, like the third bullet says, some children need very little help in their daily lives, others need a great deal. And you will see that as of 2018, 1 in 44 children aged 8 were estimated to have ASD. And that is typically the reason why age 8 is of interest, is because typically children are not diagnosed with ASD until after they have started attending school. And unless a parent specifically wants testing to be done, and even then there are limitations on its testing ability until children get to a certain age or development. And then in 2021, 286 children on the autism spectrum were reported missing to NCMEC. So I want to take an opportunity to talk about that for a second, because throughout this presentation, I'll be referring to statistics, but that data is all based on what is reported to NCMEC. There is nothing that requires all missing children to be reported to NCMEC. There is nothing in the law that requires all victims of child sex trafficking or victims of child sexual abuse material be reported to NCMEC. There is a law that requires both social service agencies and another federal law that requires law enforcement agencies to report children missing from care to NCMEC. But other than that law, there is no other law requiring reporting. So our data is based on that information that comes to us. We receive reports from law enforcement agencies. We also receive reports about missing children from parents or other guardians of children who go missing, but we will only take the report if we can verify that it has also been reported to their local law enforcement agencies. Of the 286 children on the autism spectrum that were reported to NCMEC in 2021, 67% were recovered within 1 week of being reported missing. Most of those within the first 48 hours of being reported missing. NCMEC compiles incidents of missing children on the autism spectrum who are reported to the center, as I mentioned, and this data informs our programming, and it helps us increase public awareness about the endangerments that these children face. For example, you'll see that drowning deaths are a major concern for children on the autism spectrum. Over the 10 years of our most recent analysis of data, we found that of the accidental deaths, 84% were by drowning. Furthermore, on our data, our 10-year analysis indicates a 98% recovery rate for children on the autism spectrum when NCMEC was engaged. So that means that it was reported to us that our missing child case managers were working with local law enforcement, and you will see the other statistic there that 46% of the children on the autism spectrum who were reported missing were recovered through law enforcement investigation. And then we have some other information here that should be of interest, and that is that, you'll see that it talks about wandering away or bolting. Half of the children with ASD are inclined to wander. It's also known as eloping or bolting. Right now, I think wandering is the preferred term, but you'll also hear bolting and you'll hear eloping. More than 1/3 of children with autism spectrum disorder cannot communicate their name, address, or phone number. This wandering occurs in all settings by people on the autism spectrum of all ages, under every type of adult supervision. And these children, the risk of harm coming to them increases exponentially depending on the severity of where they are on the autism spectrum. So this can run, for example, as drowning, exposure, dehydration, hypothermia, hyperthermia, traffic injuries, falls, physical restraint, encounters with strangers, and encounters with law enforcement or others. All of these carry risks for children with the behaviors that are often presented. And here are some of the communications and sensory processing things to be aware of. And children on the autism spectrum may exhibit behavioral characteristics that threaten their safety, such as attractions to body of water, or they may be attracted to roadways or highways. They may be attracted to trains or airplanes or fire trucks or traffic signals. These are among some of the more common attractions. Another thing to be aware of is that being non-speaking or non-verbal or otherwise unable to respond to searchers when their name is called. It obviously would be helpful for responders in the field to know this kind of information. And another thing is that quite often the reason for wandering is when they experience a sensory or stimuli overload that affects them in some way. And again, there is no one thing or that I can tell you about that will be that stimulant or that what will cause that overload. Again, it is different for every person on the autism spectrum. One of the common phrases that I've heard is that if you've met someone on the autism spectrum, you've met one person on the autism spectrum, because it presents in different ways for different people. And unfortunately, because of this disability, they are at heightened risk for exploitation. You will see the term echolalia, and you may very well know what that is and what that means, but a question frequently comes up about that, so I'll take a moment to explain that one of the one of the ways that they present is through the use of echolalia, which is basically a meaningless repetition of words that are frequently just spoken by another person, or maybe they've heard them in the past. And the other thing that sets it apart from someone who is just repeating back what you say, the motivation is different in this case because of this is occurring as a symptom of an underlying condition in the case of persons on the autism spectrum. So, for example, a child might say, "It's time for your bath," every time they hear their guardian filling up the bathtub. They know that those words, that string of words, has something to do with bath time, but they don't necessarily know what those individual words, such as "it is time for your" and or the word bath, mean individually, and they can't use those words in other sentences. So this is a characteristic that is often associated with autism, but it also presents in some individuals with ADHD, and they may also engage in echolalia. And quite often, the symptoms of autism spectrum disorder and ADHD are similar, and that sometimes, actually often, makes diagnosis difficult. Also, there is some evidence that 50 to 70% of individuals diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder also present with ADHD. And then there are the behavioral effects. So there is the self-stimulatory behavior, which is also known as stimming. It's also known as self-stimulation, which is in stimming and self-stimulation is the repetition of physical movements or sounds or repetitive movement of objects that are, and this is common in individuals with developmental disabilities generally, but most prevalent in people on the autism spectrum. So we'll talk for a few minutes about some of the recommended resources. Some of the core components of outreach and awareness include training for public safety personnel, such as yourselves here with us today. There are also community education and outreach, hosting events in the community, and of course, just communication in general, talking about autism, raising awareness of autism, giving thought in your organization about what do we do when we receive reports of children on the autism spectrum. And it is very challenging in these cases, not only because of the of trying to find these children, especially those who cannot communicate, but also making sure that the appropriate response is made in dispatching resources to look for the missing children on the autism spectrum, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. There are some recommended first responder programs and some community partnerships. Some of them are shown here. The Premise Alert program, of which one example is with the Addison, Illinois Police Department. It helps emergency responders and people with disabilities. And this is one of those programs where information is entered into a Premise Alert database, and it is not shared, is not accessible except unless an individual's disability has been verified, and then it is available in the event of a call dispatch to that location. It will pop up with that Premise Alert that they have. They are somewhere on the autism spectrum, and it would describe what it is, how they present. For example, there are similar programs available that you are all very familiar with. This is just one example, but of those kinds of programs where you can voluntarily submit information about the health and of residents at your address. When I was director of our public safety communications center a few years back, there was a concerned mother, who called me because at the time we did not have the ability to have a program for voluntary submission of uh, health data into our database, but we had premise alerting for officer and firefighter safety reasons. It was a hazard premise alert, and people were put into the system who were known to fight public safety responders or otherwise, or had made threats, that kind of thing. But we didn't have anything for health. And this mother contacted us because she was very concerned. She had twin boys. They were both teenagers. She described them as physically large, over 6 feet tall, over a couple hundred pounds each. And even though they were twins and they both were on the autism spectrum, they were fairly severe on the spectrum. One of the children, when receiving that stimuli overload, would become non-communicative and would not move and would not respond to instructions from anyone other than their guardian. And that was how that child reacted. The other son, he would react in the complete opposite way to the same stimuli. When he was overloaded, he would start running around in circles, waving his arms frantically and shouting and screaming, and again was very slow to respond to instructions. So you can imagine the mother's concern if first responders were to show up at the premise for any reason, and for some reason, either because the children were presenting, either at home or at school. They were homeschooled in this particular case, but if they were somewhere at home or elsewhere, and there was any other reason for emergency responders to go to the home, and then to either witness either or both of these behaviors. So in that case, we made an exception and put the children in the system. Since then, our agency has an alerting program for health reasons. But that is just an example of how these premise alert programs can work and be of benefit. And then you'll see the Safe Return program, which is basically using locative technology to help missing persons to be found and returned home. And then the Florida Department of Law Enforcement has a free training program for telecommunicators, public safety telecommunicators, to raise awareness. And actually, that program, while it is developed by and presented by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, anyone that can access their website can find the training course, can take it for free. I don't believe they award certificates unless you are, I could be wrong on that, but they may not award certificates for completion of the program if you're not within, part of the Florida public safety community, but you can still take the training for sure. Another resource that we recommend for caregivers, and you know better than I what resources are available in your community. So again, NCMEC, we talk about national programs, and so please apply the same concept to any in yours, and that is, in this case, we recommend the Y and the American Red Cross for providing swim lessons to children and families. Certainly, this is important for families to consider in order to ensure water safety and to prevent drowning. And this is particularly relevant for families with children on the autism spectrum. So just being aware of what those resources are in your community. You never know when you're going to get a call asking for some assistance or guidance. And knowing what resources are available in your community to help prevent tragic outcomes will of course raise in the eyes of the public your professionalism and your help. NCMEC has a a range of resources available. These resources are available to public safety personnel, also available to other community members and stakeholders. Some of the information that is available, and all of our information is available for free, is to foster positive relationships, to host sensory-friendly events. This will help to foster understanding in order to better support children and their families. These children on the autism spectrum, um, can use all your assistance, your resources, and to be aware that it is nothing to be afraid of. And certainly we've seen emergency communication centers around the country joining with law enforcement and fire and emergency medical services in providing these kinds of events. So NCMEC also provides guidance on implementing sound practices when handling missing child cases involving children on the autism spectrum. We have checklists available. We are working on some other information available specifically for emergency communications, and we do have some legacy checklists and other data currently available, but they're just in the process of being updated. You will see that we have, for example, some of the literature we have available is Understanding Children on the Autism Spectrum, a guide for first responders, search protocols and questionnaires for first responders, and tips for caregivers on supporting children on the autism spectrum. Team Adam is mentioned here, and for those that don't know, Team Adam is a core group of consultants available as needed. They are all retired law enforcement and with specialty, with experience working missing child cases, long-term missing cases, unidentified remains, missing and murdered persons cases, that whole range. We also have Team Adam consultants who are experts on search techniques, and including landfill searches and a host of other things like that. And they are available. Again, it's a free service that they will respond to incidents in your community upon request. And then Team Hope is a terrific group of volunteers. Team Hope is comprised of survivors, the family of survivors, and others who have themselves have been directly affected by a missing child incident, child sexual exploitation, or whatever, and along those lines, and they are there to provide peer support to a comparable either survivor or a family member of a survivor or other persons who would benefit through that peer support of empathy and strength coming from someone who truly has shared that lived experience. Some of the key tips we offer for caregivers, and again, this may be of benefit to you, is identifying the risks for their child, and especially if the child has a particular place they like to go. That is good information to have. While it may seem obvious to us now as we're having this conversation, but it may not necessarily be obvious to them or to those taking calls in the moment that the family is in crisis. So be thinking about that. We encourage caregivers to make a plan with the child's school in the event they leave the classroom. My wife was a kindergarten teacher. She's now doing pre-K education in the same school, and she has had more than her fair share of children who have wandered, or at least attempted to wander, from her classes, who are on the autism spectrum. So even though they may not be diagnosed, making a plan for children who may wander is always beneficial. We encourage you, as well as the caregivers, to be familiar with local bodies of water. other things that may be near where the child lives or goes to school. And this is really, really important. And I cannot emphasize enough, especially the bodies of water, knowing where they are, whether it be the field responders being aware of the proximity of bodies of water in their beat area or first due response area, or whether it's you knowing your community or at least having access to mapping that will show those bodies of water. And when I say bodies of water, I'm not necessarily talking about large rivers or lakes. It can be a pond, it can be a water fountain, it can be a swimming pool. There's any place where water can be is a potential hazard. And it is so important to not only know where those things are, but also to make sure that the field responders know to go to those bodies of water in the event of a report of a missing child on the autism spectrum, to look around to see if the child may be near there. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. And then also helping others to understand this issue of the speaking or the non-responsiveness to the name being called, or being fearful of people they don't know. So this is especially important for the field responders to know, and it's a great thing to ask the family or other reporting party if they know if the child is going to be non-responsive, if they are going to shut down most likely, or if they are going to be fearful of someone they don't know approaching them. These are for obvious reasons would be great for the field responders to know. So we encourage these types of questions to be included in any kind of protocol you may have on dealing with calls of missing children on the autism spectrum. Our tips for public safety personnel are fairly basic, and we provide a number of checklists, search protocols, and model policies and procedures for guidance in general, as well as specific to children on the autism spectrum or with other disabilities. Certainly training, just like what you're engaged in today, to understand the challenges of autism and the challenges of call intake and dispatch and field response to incidents of missing children on the autism spectrum. And then the third thing, search. We at NCMEC always say immediately search water. If there's a report of a missing child on the autism spectrum, the odds of them going to water are significant, and the number of drownings, while numerically small, when they make up 84% of all accidental deaths of children on the autism spectrum, it's a reason to sit up and take notice. And I will share with you that even really good searches don't necessarily go to that body of water search. As an example, not just a couple of years ago, there was a missing teenager on the autism spectrum, and the responders, they pulled in volunteer firefighters, they had professional firefighters and law enforcement, they had air support, they had a number of resources, they had canines involved, and they set up a command post, and they set up a very traditional, shall we say, search protocol, which is very well done, very, very well executed, by the book type search. But what they did not do was they were focused on the process and the protocol, and not on the circumstances of this missing child with autism spectrum disorder. They did not go immediately to search water separate from their planned search protocols. And about 2 hours into the search, a scent dog team arrived, and within 20 minutes of that scent dog team getting the scent of the child, within 20 minutes of them leaving the staging area, they located the child deceased in a small body of water, less than 100 yards from the child's home. So it is very important for you ahead of time to have some kind of dialogue with the law enforcement agencies and fire and EMS agencies you serve, to make sure that that you are all on the same page in the event of a report of a child missing on the autism spectrum, and that they should expect to be dispatched while one is officer or whomever is going to the scene to verify the missing status of the child and collect other information. Others should be responding to nearby bodies of water to look to see that whether or not the child may be there or headed there. The other thing I will mention about this is that absent a really well done search circle based on time and distance covered, without the benefit of that being available to you, most people, in my experience, underestimate how far a person can travel on foot when they are motivated to do so within a reasonably short period of time, including toddlers. You may already, you probably already know that, but I can assure you that in my experience, too many people don't take that into consideration, and quite often the search perimeter is established too tight, and the person is already outside that perimeter when they set it up. So that is another thing to be considered. Now, NCMEC Connect is our online platform for training. It has content for public safety personnel. It also has content for child welfare professionals, families, and community stakeholders. And it covers such topics as online safety for children, the importance of immediately calling 911, it talks about ways to alert public safety about the characteristics of children on the autism spectrum. We have resources on ensuring safe encounters with law enforcement and swift recoveries of children. There's also the International Association of Chiefs of Police Home Safe Project, and that we are involved in with them. And they have an excellent document recently published on the use of locative technologies. And there are other publications coming soon, including one specifically for public safety telecommunicators on taking calls of missing children on the autism spectrum. We also have 3 blogs that are available through missingkids.org that talk about this. That includes Everybody in the Pool, Lessons Learned, I Knew to Go to Water, and we have and another one called Officer Missing Kids with Autism Hits Home. Another thing I'll mention that may be of interest to you is that through the Kevin and Avante law, the Bureau of Justice Assistance seeks applications for funding to reduce the number of deaths and injuries of individuals with developmental disabilities such as autism, and also forms of dementia such as Alzheimer's disease, since due to their condition, people in both of these groups will often wander from safe environments. And this program provides funding to public safety agencies to implement locative technologies that track missing individuals. And it also provides funding to public safety agencies and partnering nonprofit organizations to develop or operate programs to prevent wandering, to increase the safety of vulnerable people, and to facilitate rescues. So this may be something else that you may want to research. But Kevin and Avante were 2 teenage children who went missing a few years ago. Both were on the autism spectrum. One slipped into a river and drowned in, I believe it was Iowa. The other child drowned in the East River of New York City. And so in their memory, this federal law and this grant process was formed. So some of the key takeaways from today is that keep in mind that children on the autism spectrum go missing and are recovered deceased at a higher rate than other children. Encourage swim lessons, but immediately search water. Field responders should go to the water in these call types. And we also have the ADAM program, and which is that when we all know that when children go missing, time is of the essence. And the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, with support and assistance from LexisNexis, have created the ADAM program to help locate missing children as quickly as possible. It's a technology that's used to quickly distribute posters containing photos of missing children with details to police, media, schools, businesses, medical centers, and individuals within a specific targeted geographical area. And we encourage that businesses and individuals can receive these targeted alerts, and we encourage people to sign up for it. We let them know that they'll only receive alerts for missing children in their area, and when because when more people are receiving alerts in a target area, the greater the likelihood that someone will recognize the missing child and help track and recover that missing child. The goal of this program is to increase the number of people receiving alerts, and the more people that join in the effort to bring missing children home quick and safely, the better. And again, this is not rocket science. These measures are fairly forward and self-evident, and so we encourage that they be followed. Some of the programs that we have available to you, we have I mentioned the NCMEC Connect for those free online training resources. We have our what we call Purple program. It's a leadership series. It familiarizes public safety professionals. This specific course is for people in a supervisory capacity, anyone who is in a formal leadership role in emergency communication centers or law enforcement agencies or in state missing person clearinghouses are eligible to attend this. It's an in-person program. The next one coming up is June 6th through 8th. It's 2.5 days of in-person training at our headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. Airfare is paid, lodging is paid for. Also, we provide 2 meals a day for the 2.5 days of training, and the attendees are responsible for their evening meal and also for ground transportation between the airport and the training site or their hotel. But otherwise, NCMEC picks up the cost through the generosity of a federal grant. We encourage you to consider attending this training course. Again, the next one coming up is June 6th through 8th, and we'd be more than happy to have you join us. Otherwise, the next course is going to be held in September, and you can get information about it through that QR code or by going to missingkids.org/training. Another program that many of you are probably already involved in is the Missing Kids Readiness Program. And the requirements for this program is that the ECC director or the chief or sheriff of a law enforcement agency completes all of the online modules through NCMEC Connect that are called the MKRP modules. Also, that all telecommunicators complete the required online modules, and those vary depending upon your responsibilities in your center. And then then the other component of the requirement is that the Emergency Communication Center adopts the APCO ANSI standard for public safety telecommunicators responding to calls of missing and sexually exploited children, and or the model policy from NCMEC or IACP. And if you don't adopt the entire standard or the entire policy, at least what we consider the essential or critical elements of that. And then the other piece for 911 centers is that there is a quality assurance component that addresses how quality assurance will be done on reports of missing children. But that program is also free, and it can all be done online. And in return, agencies receive a plaque, receive a certificate for framing, will get named, highlighted on social media and also on the NCMEC website. This is the QR code for some of our resources available, specifically on autism. And then if you want to contact me for further information about not only training, but really pretty much anything else, feel free to give me a call. Be more than happy to help you out in any way, shape, or form. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Fred. If anyone has any questions, definitely put them in the chat. I do have one question for you, Fred. It's from Callie. She says, you stated that it's not required to report missing children to the foundation. Is there any upcoming legislation in the works trying to change this?
Great question, but not that I am aware of. Right now, as I mentioned, it is only, there's a federal law that requires child welfare agencies to report, or they can lose, their federal funding is vulnerable if they don't, if children are missing from state placement, from state care, so like foster care or some other living facility. Same thing for law enforcement. 34 U.S. Code 41308 specific. That's the same code section that requires that missing children be entered within 2 hours of being reported missing. That same federal law also includes the mandatory reporting by the law enforcement agency that takes the report and has the child entered into NCIC, that they are responsible for also reporting a child missing from care to NCMEC. And it also requires in the federal law that they cooperate with child welfare agencies and NCMEC to locate those missing children missing from care. But those are the only laws on the books at this time.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank Fred for joining us today. I apologize for those of you that were having any technical issues. We'll try to make sure we get that fixed in the future. I've gone ahead and shared a few files that include the Denise Amber Lee Foundation on-site classes that we offer, as well as our third-party quality assurance services. For those of you that are joining us live, you will be getting the certificate sent to you after. For those of you that are watching the recording, definitely go ahead and email me once you've finished the recording. I'll put my email in the chat as well. I've also gone ahead and shared the link to register for next month's webinar. So hopefully we won't have any issues with that. But again, thank you guys all so much for being here today. Fred, thank you so much for joining us and presenting to us today. And if there's no further questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Fred. All right. Thank you, guys.